There's a wide variety of file systems that you can put on an empty partition in Linux, but the idea of all of them is the same. You take a big empty partition, like a big field, and you divide it up so that you can store data efficiently. Like if this parking lot were an example of a file system, each car would be a piece of data that is stored logically in its place. And some file systems have, bigger spaces for parking buses, some have littler spaces for parking compact cars, but conceptually they all do the same thing. Now, like I said, there's a bunch of different options available in Linux. ext is the most common family of file systems that you can use on Linux. It's very mature. It's been around forever. The later versions support journals so that if a computer gets powered down before the reads and writes are synced up, usually you can salvage the data on there. So it's fairly robust as well. XFS is a file system that's been around for a long time. This used to be what you had to use for really, really big drives, but now everything supports big drives, so that's not really the issue anymore. It is still used by CentOS and Red Hat though, so XFS is still widely used. Interestingly, it has its own set of tools, like for file checking, fixing things, manipulating the XFS file system itself. Rather than using standard Linux tools, it has its own set of XFS tools. There's a couple others. BTRFS, it's often called ButterFS. This was the new kid on the block, right? This has awesome features like snapshotting, and it's just awesome. Unfortunately, it's kind of been abandoned, which is weird, but nonetheless, it's kind of what happened. So BTRFS is still functional, but it's not widely used anymore. And then, of course, I'm just going to mention them. DOS, or the Windows world, has their own file systems like NTFS, VFAT, FAT32, things that you're familiar with if you're in the Windows world. And Linux can usually read and even write to most of these file systems, but when we're talking about Linux file systems, we're generally talking about Linux specific ones, and ext is awesome. I'll be honest, I like ext. There's generally three. There's ext2, ext3, and ext4. Now, this isn't necessarily like one is better than the next. They each have their own features, but ext4 is the newest and has the most features. I'll be honest, I almost always pick ext4 as my default file system. Not because it's necessarily better than any other option, but because it's so widely used. That means there are a ton of tools and utilities and tutorials online to get data back if you have some corruption. So ext4 is my file system of choice, mainly because it's used in so many places. When it comes to creating a file system, basically you need a partitioned hard drive so that you can, have a partition or that empty field in order to draw the lines for your parking lot or put that file system on. Now I'm going to say LSBLK, and we're going to see these are the different block devices on our system. I have two partitions created. I have SDB1 and SDC1. These are just 10 gigabyte partitions on 10 gigabyte drives, so it takes up the whole drive, and we're going to format each of them. All right, so I'm going to say, now, here's another really cool thing about Linux. The file formatting or the hard drive formatting programs all start with MK for make FS file system, and then just hit tab a couple times, and you're going to see all the various tools for creating the different types of file systems. So let's say we're going to make a ButterFS file system. So we would say mkfs.btrfs, and then what partition we want to create that file system on. In our case, dev sdb1. All right, so it's created it. It says we have 10 gigabytes, ID is 1. That's the path. Okay, so it looks like it did that without any problems. Let's create another file system. So mkfs, hit tab a couple times so I can see our options. Now, like I said, I usually use ext4, so I'm going to say ext4 dev sdc1, which was the other partition that I had created on this system. And I went through and it created that file system. And now a really cool thing, if we use the LSBLK, but we add the -F, it's going to show us the file systems that are on the particular block devices as well. So if we do that, we're going to see up here we have SDA1, which remember I said Red Hat and CentOS use XFS. Well, sure enough, there it is. XFS is used. SDB1 is that ButterFS file system that we created. And then down here is an ext4 file system that we created on our system. So that's all there is to creating the various file systems, and really you can pick whichever one you want, but you do have to have a partition in existence before you can create a file system on it. And while yes, there are a whole bunch of file systems that you can use on Linux and it supports a bunch, I really recommend that ext4 family of file systems if you have a choice and you're just trying to decide what one to use, largely because it's used so often. There's so much support. If something goes wrong, you can find a lot of help online. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.